report. It focuses on Bosasa, now African Global Operations. It's alleged that the company was used as a front to get kickbacks in exchange for lucrative government contracts. We now unpack part 3 of the State Capture Commission report with SABC News specialist researcher Amil Umraw. Very good morning and thanks for making the time. Who can forget that dramatic testimony of Angelo Agrizzi at the State Capture Commission, and it seems now he's been vindicated with this report.
Well, Desiree, yes, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, he found that there was sort of overwhelming evidence that there was indeed attempts through various forms of inducement to influence members of the National Executive. And office bearers and a whole bunch of functionaries and officials employed in different organs of the state. There are names of people in the high-ranking members of the ANC, which come across as well. And it shows that the now deceased Gavin Watson, who was the head of Bosasa at the time, his involvement in corruption and corrupted activities was sort of overwhelming. And the report found that Bosasa's primary mechanism for attempting to influence sort of public office bearers was the payments of cash bribes. And basically, these bribes were given out to sort of influence that official towards handing over Bosasa contracts from the state, or either to keep them, out of the eyes of the law. And people who were mentioned specifically were Gwede Mantashe, who was the ANC Secretary General at the time, former President Jacob Zuma, Nomvulo Makanyane, and Dudu Myeni, for example. So some high-ranking ANC members implicated in this report.
How does it recommend dealing with the fact that the founder of Bosasa, Gavin Watson, has now passed away?
Well, the report does give indication to that. Of course, it then has to now pinpoint other members of the Bosasa team who we can take action against. So, for example, the Commission believes that there's reasonable grounds to justify that law enforcement agencies investigate senior SARS officials like George Papadakis and businessman Kevin Wakeford. It also establishes sort of prima facie cases of money laundering against people like Angelo Agrizzi and other Bosasa employees. So the evidence sort of establishes all these prima facie cases of corruption against other members of Bosasa other than Gavin Watson, some of whom are already facing criminal charges like Angelo Agrizzi, but also people like Papa Leshabane and former prisons boss Linda MT. So basically, all those that the Commission finds that may have been implicated in this report could possibly face criminal action in the future.
Also, criminal investigations suggested for those cabinet members you mentioned, Mineral Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe and former Water and Sanitation Minister Nomvulo Makanyane. Which way can the presidency go from here? The president said he will only start dealing with the recommendations once he's presented to Parliament later on in the year.
Well, it really puts the president in a bit of a precarious situation when it comes to the accountability. President Ramaphosa sort of ran his campaign and his ticket on anti-corruption, and this puts now senior members of the ANC, like Gwede Mantashe, directly in the spotlight. So, for example, the Commission heard evidence that security upgrades were installed by Bosasa at 3 of Gwede Mantashe's properties, which he didn't dispute. The Commission concluded that there's a reasonable suspicion that Mantashe sort of received the free installations, knowing that Bosasa sort of sought to influence him. And use his influence to get in touch with other members of the party. So what the Commission finds is that there's a reasonable prospect that further investigation will uncover sort of a prima facie case against Gwede Mantashe in respect of corruption. So yes, those matters have not gone to the court system as yet. And the president did say, as you say, that by June, that he will have a chance to look over the entire report and then make recommendations. However, he is now sitting with senior members of his party who have been strongly implicated in these matters, and whether he's going to wait that long to take any sort of decisions is remain to be seen.
Amil Umraw is a specialist researcher here at the SABC, the Jacob Zuma. Thank you so much for your time, Amil. And the Jacob Zuma Foundation has released a statement saying the former president was denied the opportunity of a neutral platform to put across his side of the story. The statement further says the application for the review and setting aside of the refusal by Justice Raymond Zondo to recuse himself despite the relationship between him and Zuma is a matter pending before the courts. The foundation says Jacob Zuma rejects any purported findings by Judge Zondo which were made without affording him the right to be heard. Zuma will consult with his legal team on the appropriate course of action to be taken. Right, let's take a look at some of the tweets you've sent through this morning in relation to those questions we were asking. Togo says, after all the time and resources spent on the commission, there doesn't seem to be anything concrete except recommendations for further investigations that could be done. So many implicated people will approach courts for review of findings up to the Court. It's an interesting one, Togo. Beggs and Mabele saying this will only go down in history. This commission was the waste of money. The real culprits in all this are roaming the streets and are untouchable. Really, we're taken for a ride here. Siabulela Kwaikwai says, good morning, Ausdesra, and good morning to your viewers. I haven't read the report yet, but I hope it's not vague. Even though it will not hold much prosecuting power, it should be strong enough to present the NPA with something sufficient to work with. Mpop Bryson Sebashe says, one wonders how did Zondo miss an overwhelming evidence against son of the president? Is this a classical case of George Orwell's Animal Farm at play?